Hello, family. Please subscribe. Enjoy your story.
Your manhood is small. Don't blame me. How would you even ask? The kids are yours.
Your manhood is something, Cedric. I tried to ignore it for years. The words landed harder than a gunshot. Cedric Hale stood frozen at the entrance of the luxury hotel suite in Miami Beach, staring at his wife like he didn't recognize her anymore. The ocean waves crashed softly outside the balcony doors. Inside the room, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Lizzie's silk robe hung loosely against her shoulders, while panic flooded her face. The man beside her nearly tripped over the edge of the bed, trying to stand properly. "Cedric, wait. Don't," Cedric said quietly. That one word stopped the entire room cold. His chest rose slowly. His hands trembled at his sides, not from anger, from humiliation, from heartbreak, from the horrifying realization that the woman he built his entire world around had been carrying resentment for years. The expensive hotel lights reflected against the polished marble floor, while Cedric looked between Lizzie and the stranger standing beside her. The stranger lowered his eyes immediately. Smart man. Because the expression on Cedric's face wasn't rage, it was worse. It was devastation. "Well, I can explain," Lizzie whispered carefully, taking one nervous step forward. Cedric laughed once, a dry, broken laugh. "Explain what exactly?" he asked. "Explain why my wife is in another man's hotel room, or explain why you looked relieved after finally saying what you really think about me." Lizzie opened her mouth, closed it again. For a second, she almost looked guilty, but then something inside her hardened. "You want the truth?" she asked quietly. Cedric's jaw tightened. "I thought that's what marriage was supposed to be." The other man grabbed his shirt from the floor quickly. "I should leave." Cedric never even looked at him. "You should have left before touching my wife." The room went silent again. Heavy silence. The kind that makes your stomach tighten. Lizzie folded her arms across herself, but it wasn't confidence. It looked more like emotional exhaustion. Years of frustration finally spilling out at the worst possible moment. "You were never really happy with me," Cedric said slowly. "Were you?" Lizzie looked away toward the balcony. Miami's city lights flickered against the glass windows behind her. "I tried," she admitted softly. Those two words shattered something inside him. Not because she cheated, because she sounded tired, like she had been losing this battle long before tonight. Cedric swallowed hard and looked around the hotel suite. The champagne glasses, the scattered clothes, the bed, everything suddenly felt disgusting. His voice dropped lower. "So, all those years, all those family photos, our twins, all of it was fake?" Lizzie's eyes flashed immediately. "No, don't do that." "Do what?" "Don't pretend I never loved you." Cedric stared at her for several painful seconds. "But you stopped." That time, Lizzie couldn't answer. A long silence filled the room again, while Cedric slowly nodded to himself, like the truth was finally becoming clear. And honestly, that silence hurt more than the cheating itself, because deep down he realized something terrifying. This marriage didn't break tonight. It broke slowly, quietly, right inside their own home while they kept pretending everything was fine. Cedric took another slow step into the hotel suite, but his legs suddenly felt heavy, like his body no longer belonged to him. For years, people looked at him like he had everything: the private jets, the billion-dollar company, the mansion in Chicago, the beautiful wife, the twins. From the outside, Cedric Hale looked like a man who had already won at life. But standing there in that Miami hotel room staring at the woman he loved beside another man, none of the money mattered anymore. His voice cracked slightly. "So, when were you planning to tell me?" he asked. Lizzie shook her head immediately. "I wasn't trying to hurt you." Cedric looked at her in disbelief. A painful smile crossed his face. "You already did." The other man quietly slipped toward the door, clearly wanting no part of the emotional destruction unfolding inside that room. Nobody stopped him. Nobody cared anymore. The door clicked shut behind him. Now, it was just husband and wife. Two people who once promised forever. Two people standing in the ruins of a marriage. Neither of them knew how to save. Lizzie wiped beneath her eyes quickly, before tears could fully fall. "You think this was easy for me?" she whispered. Cedric looked exhausted now. Not angry, just emotionally drained. "Easy?" he repeated softly. "Lizzie, I gave you everything." She nodded slowly. "I know. Then why does it still feel like I was never enough?" That question hit harder than shouting ever could. Lizzie looked down at the floor immediately, because the truth was complicated, and ugly, and painful. The room filled with another long silence before the narrator finally speaks directly to the audience. Imagine building an empire for somebody you love, only to discover they were secretly unhappy the entire time. Imagine giving someone luxury, security, a family, a future, but emotionally losing them little by little without realizing it. Could you forgive betrayal like this? Do you think emotional neglect can quietly destroy a marriage even before cheating begins? And honestly, who do you blame more right now? Cedric, Lizzie, or both of them? Comment below, and welcome back to Alex Romance and Divorce Stories, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales. If you enjoy emotional stories filled with love, betrayal, marriage drama, painful truths, and real-life lessons, please take 1 second to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support genuinely helps YouTube recommend these stories to more people, and it helps this channel grow faster. So thank you. Seriously. Now, listen carefully. Because this story is not just about cheating. It's about insecurity, loneliness, pride, and two people who slowly stopped understanding each other while pretending everything was okay. And trust me, the worst part of this night still hadn't happened yet. Cedric turned away from Lizzie for a moment and pressed both hands against his waist like he was trying to hold himself together. The room suddenly felt too small, too quiet, too hot. His breathing became uneven, as painful thoughts rushed through his mind faster than he could control them. Every anniversary, every family vacation, every time she smiled beside him for cameras, every late-night kiss, every "I love you." Now all of it felt questionable. Cedric shook his head slowly before looking back at her again, and this time, the pain in his eyes scared Lizzie more than anger would have. "You know what's crazy?" he asked quietly. Lizzie swallowed hard. "What?" "I spent years worrying you married me for money." He laughed bitterly. "Meanwhile, you were secretly miserable the entire time." "That's not fair," Lizzie said quickly. Cedric stepped closer. "No?" He snapped. "Then what was fair, Lizzie? Lying to me every single day while sleeping beside me at night. I tried to make this marriage work. And I tried to trust you." His voice echoed through the suite. For the first time that night, real anger finally cracked through his composure. Lizzie's eyes watered instantly. "You think this only hurt you?" she asked, emotionally. "You shut me out for years, Cedric. Every conversation turned into business. Every disagreement became about control. You stopped seeing me." Cedric's jaw tightened hard. "And cheating fixed that?" Lizzie looked away. "No." That answer hurt, because it sounded honest. Cedric paced across the room slowly, before stopping near the balcony doors. Miami's nightlife continued outside like nothing had happened. Cars moved. Music played somewhere in the distance. Meanwhile, his entire life was collapsing inside that suite. Then, suddenly, a darker thought entered his mind. The kind of thought capable of destroying everything permanently. Cedric turned back toward her slowly. His voice dropped low. Cold, painfully cold. Were the twins even mine? Smack! Lizzie slapped him across the face instantly. The sound cut through the room sharply. Cedric froze. So did she. For a moment, neither of them moved. Lizzie's chest rose heavily, while tears streamed down her cheeks. "Don't do that," she whispered emotionally. "Don't destroy the only innocent thing left in this marriage." Cedric looked at her silently. The red mark on his face slowly darkened beneath the hotel lights. And honestly, that slap said more than words ever could. Because, despite everything, despite the cheating, despite the lies, despite the resentment, their children were still the only pure thing connecting them together. Cedric looked down at his wedding ring for several long seconds, then quietly removed it. Lizzie's expression immediately broke. Cedric. But he walked past her. No screaming, no threats, no dramatic revenge speech. Just heartbreak. Raw heartbreak. Right before reaching the door, he stopped briefly without turning around. His voice sounded exhausted now, almost empty. "I would have forgiven almost anything," he said quietly, "but humiliating me with the one insecurity I trusted you to protect." He shook his head slowly. "I can't come back from that." Then he walked out, and the second that hotel room door closed behind him, Lizzie collapsed onto the edge of the bed crying. Not because she got caught, because deep down, she knew something terrifying. She hadn't just destroyed her marriage, she had destroyed the only man who ever truly tried to love her, despite his flaws. And somehow, that hurt her too. 3 years earlier, Chicago, Illinois. Snow drifted slowly across the city while morning traffic crawled beneath towering glass buildings in downtown Chicago. The streets buzzed with motion long before sunrise. Black SUVs moved through wet roads. Coffee shops overflowed with exhausted professionals. Trains roared above crowded sidewalks. And 38 floors above the city, Cedric Hale stood silently inside his office, staring through the massive windows of Hale's cyber defense headquarters. The skyline stretched endlessly before him. Cold, powerful, untouchable, a lot like him. His tailored charcoal suit fit perfectly against his tall frame, while the silver watch around his wrist reflected the grey morning light. From the outside, Cedric looked like the definition of success. A handsome CEO, billionaire investor, tech genius. Magazine covers constantly praised him as one of the youngest cybersecurity moguls in America. But nobody inside that building truly knew him. Not really. Employees feared disappointing him. Business partners respected him. Women desired him. Yet, emotionally, Cedric remained completely disconnected from almost everyone around him. His assistant, Monica, carefully entered the office carrying a tablet. "You have the investor meeting at 9, Forbes interview at 11, and the charity gala tonight starts at 7. Cedric never looked away from the window. Cancel the interview. They already flew in from New York. Then they can fly back. Monica sighed softly under her breath before typing notes into the tablet. Working for Cedric required patience. The man barely smiled, barely socialized, and almost never explained himself. "You also missed dinner with your mother again," Monica added carefully. Cedric finally turned around. His blue eyes looked tired despite the expensive suit and polished appearance. "I sent flowers. She said she wants her son, not another bouquet." Cedric grabbed his coffee from the desk. "Well, flowers are what she's getting." Monica knew better than to push further. Most people assumed Cedric acted arrogant because he was rich. That wasn't fully true. The real problem was simpler. Cedric genuinely did not know how to emotionally connect with people anymore. Years of pressure had hardened him. Success isolated him. And trust? Trust became nearly impossible. Monica hesitated near the doorway. "About tonight's gala." Cedric looked at her impatiently. "What now?" "There'll be media coverage, a lot of high-profile guests. Maybe try looking less miserable this time." For the first time all morning, Cedric almost smiled. "Almost. I'll do my best." After Monica left, silence returned to the office. Cedric loosened his tie slightly before sitting behind the massive black desk overlooking Chicago. Stacks of contracts covered one side. Security reports filled another. Every inch of his life revolved around control, schedules, deadlines, expansion, money. That was the only thing he truly understood. Because money made sense. People didn't. Cedric opened his laptop and stared blankly at a family photo saved on the screen. It was old. Just him and his father, standing outside a tiny hardware store in Indiana years ago. Before the millions, before the fame, before the emotional walls became impossible to climb. Cedric's expression darkened slightly. because every lesson his father taught him came with a warning attached. Never trust too easily, never show weakness, and never believe love comes without conditions. Those lessons shaped the man he became, even if they quietly ruined him too. By 38, Cedric Hale owned one of the most powerful cybersecurity companies in the country. Banks hired him. Government agencies consulted him. Fortune 500 companies paid millions for his protection systems. Hale's cyber defense had grown from a tiny rented office into a billion-dollar empire in less than 10 years. And Cedric controlled every detail personally. That was another reason relationships never survived around him. Control. He needed it constantly. Inside the executive conference room, several board members sat nervously around a polished glass table while Cedric reviewed quarterly reports. Nobody interrupted him. Nobody checked their phones. The tension in the room stayed heavy any time Cedric spoke. "We lost a pharmaceutical client in Seattle," one executive said carefully. Cedric looked up immediately. Why? They accepted a lower bid from another firm. Cedric closed the report slowly. Then somebody in this room failed. Silence. Nobody defended themselves. Cedric's sharp gaze moved around the table. "Do you know why competitors fear us?" he asked calmly. Nobody answered. "Because I don't tolerate weakness." One board member cleared his throat nervously. "We can recover the account." Cedric stood from his chair. "No," he said coldly. "We should have never lost it in the first place." Meetings with Cedric always felt like warfare. Precise, emotionless, relentless. And while his employees respected his intelligence, most secretly feared him too. Hours later, Cedric walked through the main operations floor while dozens of employees monitored live cyber threats across massive digital screens. The company operated 24 hours a day. Analysts moved quickly between workstations. Phones rang non-stop. Code flashed across giant monitors mounted against dark walls. Cedric built all of this from nothing. And deep down, that mattered to him more than people realized. Because every dollar he earned became proof that he would never struggle like his childhood again. As he stepped into a private elevator, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Cedric almost ignored it. Almost. Finally he answered. "Yes?" A soft female voice responded. "Mr. Hale, this is Vanessa. From, last month." Cedric immediately remembered. Beautiful brunette. Luxury rooftop date. 2 dinners. 3 weeks of pretending she liked him for more than money. His expression turned blank instantly. "What do you need?" A short silence followed. "Well, I just wanted to see if you were free tonight." Cedric leaned against the elevator wall. "You disappeared for 2 weeks." "I've been busy." "No," Cedric replied calmly. "You met someone wealthier." The woman laughed nervously. "That's not fair." "It's accurate." "Cedric." He hung up. No hesitation, no emotion. Because situations like this happened constantly. Women loved access to his lifestyle. The restaurants, the vacations, the penthouse, the status, but genuine connection, that felt impossible to find anymore. Cedric slipped the phone back into his pocket while the elevator descended toward the underground parking garage. For a brief moment, exhaustion crossed his face again. Not physical exhaustion, emotional exhaustion. The kind that comes from believing every relationship eventually becomes transactional. And honestly, that belief was slowly turning him into someone even he barely recognized anymore. Cedric rarely talked about Indiana. Most people around him assumed he grew up wealthy because of the way he carried himself now. The expensive watches, the tailored suits, the private drivers. But the truth looked very different. Cedric grew up in a small town nearly 3 hours outside Chicago, inside a cramped 2-bedroom house behind his father's struggling hardware store. Back then, money controlled everything. Arguments, stress, silence. His father, Raymond Hale, believed softness destroyed men. Every conversation sounded like a lesson about survival. "People respect power," Raymond used to say, while counting cash behind the register. "The second they smell weakness, they use you." Cedric heard those words almost daily growing up, especially after his mother left. He was only 13 when she packed 2 suitcases and walked out during a thunderstorm without even saying goodbye properly. Cedric still remembered standing near the staircase while his father drank whiskey quietly in the kitchen afterward. Young Cedric asked the question carefully. "Dad, are you okay?" Raymond kept staring at the table. "Women leave when men stop being useful," he muttered. That sentence stayed with Cedric for years, maybe forever. By 16, Cedric worked before and after school helping inside the hardware store. He stocked shelves, managed inventory, cleaned floors. Meanwhile, his father constantly criticized him any time emotions appeared. One winter evening, Cedric came home after getting into a fight at school. A girl he liked had publicly embarrassed him after discovering his family was struggling financially. Raymond listened quietly while repairing an old cash register behind the counter. "She said she didn't date broke guys," Cedric admitted bitterly. His father barely reacted. "Good." Cedric frowned. "Good?" Raymond finally looked at him. "Now you learned early. That people are cruel?" "No," his father replied coldly. "That love is attached to value." Cedric never forgot that conversation, not because he agreed with it immediately, because over time, life kept proving it true in his eyes. Years later, when Cedric received a scholarship to study computer engineering in Illinois, Raymond drove him to campus himself. The entire ride stayed quiet until they reached the dormitory parking lot. Then Raymond handed him an envelope containing barely $200. "All I could save," he said. Cedric looked down at the money. "You need this more than me. Take it." Cedric slowly accepted it. Before leaving, Raymond grabbed his shoulder firmly. "You become successful enough," he said carefully, "and nobody can ever abandon you again." Cedric nodded silently. At the time, it sounded motivating. But looking back years later, Cedric realized something tragic. His father never taught him how to love people. He only taught him how to fear losing them. And fear changes people, especially men already struggling with insecurity. By the time Cedric became wealthy, vulnerability felt almost impossible. Every relationship became a risk assessment. Every emotional connection carried suspicion. Every compliment sounded conditional. Even happiness came with caution attached to it. Because deep down, part of him still believed what his father taught him inside that tiny Indiana hardware store. People stay loyal to power, not people. By the time Cedric entered his 30s, dating had become emotionally exhausting. Not because women ignored him. The opposite. Once Hale cyber defense became successful, attention followed everywhere. Exclusive lounges in Chicago, private business events in Manhattan, luxury vacations in Los Angeles. Women approached him constantly. Beautiful women, educated women, influencers, models, executives. At first, Cedric enjoyed the attention. Who wouldn't? But eventually patterns became impossible to ignore. One ex-girlfriend cried dramatically after he refused to buy her a luxury condo downtown. Another secretly recorded private moments hoping to leverage his fame online. A third disappeared immediately after discovering he wanted a serious relationship instead of endless spending. Each situation hardened him further. Every failed relationship fed the paranoia already growing inside him. And eventually Cedric stopped seeing romance as emotional connection. He started seeing it as negotiation. One Friday evening, Cedric sat inside an upscale rooftop restaurant overlooking Lake Michigan while his latest girlfriend, Brielle, admired a diamond bracelet across the table. "It's beautiful," she whispered excitedly. Cedric watched her carefully, not smiling, just observing. "You like the bracelet more than the dinner," he said. Brielle laughed lightly. "You're impossible. Am I wrong?" She looked slightly annoyed now. "Well, most women would appreciate gifts like this." Cedric leaned back in his chair. Most women also leave when the gifts stop. The warmth between them vanished instantly. Brielle placed the bracelet down slowly. "You know what your problem is?" she asked. Cedric already looked uninterested. "Enlighten me." "You treat every woman like she's guilty before she even hurts you." Cedric's expression stayed unreadable. "That approach saves time." "No," Brielle replied softly. "It keeps you lonely." That relationship ended 2 weeks later, just like the others. Always temporary, always emotionally shallow, always reinforcing the same fear. Eventually, Cedric stopped trying to emotionally invest at all. Work became easier, safer, predictable, unlike relationships. The problem was, loneliness doesn't disappear simply because someone ignores it. Late at night inside his penthouse, Cedric sometimes found himself staring across the city in complete silence, while expensive whiskey sat untouched beside him. The wealth felt meaningless during moments like that. The silence inside those massive rooms became unbearable sometimes. No laughter, no emotional warmth, no genuine connection, just success. And honestly, success gets cold when there's nobody trustworthy to share it with. That same loneliness followed Cedric into the charity gala 3 nights later, an event he originally planned to avoid completely. But Monica insisted his public image needed improvement. So reluctantly, Cedric arrived at the downtown museum gala wearing another perfectly tailored suit, prepared for another night of fake smiles and transactional conversations. Then he saw her, Lizzie Monroe, standing near the center ballroom staircase in a dark emerald dress, while coordinating event staff with calm confidence. Cedric noticed several things immediately. She wasn't trying too hard to impress anyone. She wasn't hovering near wealthy guests. And unlike most people around him, she looked completely unimpressed by his presence. For the first time in a very long time, Cedric became curious. And that curiosity was about to change both their lives forever. Long before Lizzie Monroe entered luxury ballrooms filled with politicians, celebrities, and millionaires, she grew up in a brick apartment building on the south side of Chicago, where survival mattered more than appearances. The neighborhood taught people to mature early, too early. Sirens echoed through certain streets almost every night. Small corner stores covered their windows with metal bars before sunset. Old men played chess outside barbershops, while mothers rushed children indoors before trouble started somewhere nearby. But despite the struggles, the community carried warmth too. Cookouts during summer, music floating through apartment windows, churchwomen checking on everybody's business before Sunday service even started, and families doing their best to survive together. Lizzie grew up surrounded by strong black women who carried entire households on exhausted shoulders without complaining publicly. Her mother, Rochelle Monroe, worked double shifts at a nursing home for nearly 20 years. Some nights she came home so tired she barely removed her shoes before falling asleep on the couch. Still, she never allowed her children to feel unloved. Being broke doesn't mean being broken, Rochelle always told them. Lizzie held onto those words deeply, especially during difficult years. As a teenager, Lizzie quickly understood how differently the world treated beautiful women. Teachers gave her attention. Men stared too long. Women sometimes judged her before even speaking to her. At 15, she was already learning how to defend herself emotionally. One afternoon after school, an older man leaned from his car window while Lizzie walked home with groceries. "You too pretty to be carrying bags around this neighborhood," he called out. Lizzie ignored him immediately and kept walking. Her older cousin beside her rolled her eyes. "Get used to it," she muttered. "Pretty girls don't get peace." That reality followed Lizzie everywhere, and honestly, it exhausted her, because people noticed her appearance before noticing her intelligence, before noticing her ambition, before noticing her heart. By 23, Lizzie had already promised herself something important. No matter how hard life became, she would never depend entirely on a man financially. Never, because she watched too many women lose themselves that way, including her own mother. Rochelle Monroe loved deeply, too deeply sometimes. That became the problem. After Lizzie's biological father disappeared during childhood, Rochelle spent years moving through unhealthy relationships, trying to rebuild stability for her family. Most of those men came with promises. Very few came with peace. One boyfriend drank heavily and disappeared for days. Another constantly borrowed money without paying it back. One man became emotionally manipulative, criticizing Rochelle until she slowly stopped recognizing her own worth. Lizzie noticed everything, even when adults thought she didn't. Late at night, she sometimes heard muffled arguments through thin apartment walls. Crying, doors slamming, silence afterward. And then the saddest part of all, watching her mother forgive people who clearly didn't deserve it. One evening, 16-year-old Lizzie walked into the kitchen and found Rochelle quietly wiping tears while washing dishes. The apartment smelled like fried catfish and candle wax. Rochelle quickly looked away. "You okay?" Lizzie asked carefully. "I'm fine, baby." Lizzie didn't believe her. "That man yelled at you again?" Rochelle kept scrubbing the plate harder. "He's just stressed." Lizzie shook her head immediately. "No, he's disrespectful." Rochelle finally turned toward her daughter. "You'll understand relationships when you're older." But Lizzie already understood enough. Love made people tolerate things they shouldn't. That scared her. A lot. From that point forward, Lizzie became emotionally cautious around men, especially successful men with control issues, because she noticed something growing up. The more power certain men had, the more they expected women to shrink themselves emotionally around them. And Lizzie refused to become that kind of woman. She watched her mother sacrifice too much already, her peace, her confidence, her emotional stability. So, by adulthood, Lizzie built invisible walls around herself, not because she hated love, because she feared losing herself inside it. That fear shaped every relationship she entered afterward. Some men called her difficult, others called her guarded. The truth was simpler. Lizzie just learned early that attraction means nothing if respect disappears later, and respect was the one thing she refused to negotiate anymore. By 29, Lizzie Monroe had built a respected luxury event planning business in Chicago almost entirely through referrals and reputation. Corporate galas, celebrity fundraisers, private weddings, political networking events. She handled high-pressure situations calmly, and wealthy clients loved that about her. Lizzie understood elegance naturally. Not fake elegance, real sophistication. The kind that came from confidence instead of desperation. Inside elite social circles, she learned quickly how rich people behaved behind closed doors. Some treated service workers terribly. Others performed kindness only when cameras appeared nearby. And many powerful men assumed beautiful women existed purely for decoration. Lizzie experienced that constantly. One investor once grabbed her wrist during a rooftop networking event and smiled arrogantly. "You should stop planning parties and marry somebody rich already," he joked. Lizzie slowly removed his hand from her wrist. "Maybe rich men should develop personalities worth marrying first." The nearby guests laughed awkwardly. The investor didn't. Moments like that happened often. Men admired her beauty openly while quietly underestimating her intelligence. Sometimes clients flirted during meetings instead of discussing contracts. Others assumed she slept her way into luxury spaces because they couldn't imagine a black woman building success independently. At first, those assumptions hurt. Eventually, they simply annoyed her. Lizzie learned how to navigate wealthy environments carefully without compromising herself. She stayed polite, professional, emotionally controlled. But deep down, she distrusted men who led with money instead of character. And, ironically, that mindset was exactly why her first interaction with Cedric Hale went so badly. Because Cedric walked into that downtown charity gala already convinced women around him wanted something. Meanwhile, Lizzie entered the same event already exhausted by wealthy men assuming the worst about her. Neither of them realized their emotional defenses were about to collide head-on. The gala buzzed with energy that night. Politicians mingled near the ballroom entrance. Champagne glasses moved constantly through crowded conversations. Soft jazz echoed beneath crystal chandeliers, while photographers captured important guests arriving one after another. Lizzie moved through the ballroom confidently, coordinating staff through an earpiece while checking schedules on her tablet. Then she noticed movement near the very important person entrance. Cedric Hale had arrived. Several women glanced toward him immediately. Tall, sharp jawline, dark tailored suit, quiet confidence. The type of man who naturally controlled attention without trying too hard. Lizzie recognized him instantly from business magazines and technology interviews. She expected arrogance before he even spoke. Unfortunately, she wasn't entirely wrong. Cedric barely wanted to attend the gala that night. He only came because Monica insisted disappearing from public events damaged his image. So he entered the museum ballroom already irritated. Fake smiles surrounded him instantly. Investors shook his hand. Executives praised his company. Women stared a little too long. Cedric tolerated all of it politely, while internally counting minutes until he could leave. Then, near the champagne tower, he accidentally brushed against a passing server and spilled champagne across the sleeve of his jacket. Damn it. Before frustration could fully settle in, a calm female voice spoke nearby. "Careful, Mr. Hale." Cedric looked up. Lizzie handed him a black napkin while maintaining steady eye contact. For a second, he forgot about the champagne completely. She looked stunning in the emerald dress. Not flashy, not desperate for attention. Just naturally elegant. Cedric accepted the napkin slowly. "You know who I am?" Lizzie gave a small shrug. "Most people in this building probably do." Cedric wiped his sleeve carefully. "Well, people usually become extra friendly after recognizing me." The second those words left his mouth, Lizzie's expression changed. Slightly colder, slightly disappointed. "Oh," she said quietly, "you think I'm flirting for access." Cedric sensed tension immediately, but didn't back down. "You work around wealthy men all day. It wouldn't exactly be surprising." Lizzie folded her arms slowly. There it was again, that assumption, that exhausting assumption. Her voice stayed calm, but her eyes sharpened instantly. "Not every black woman around rich men is trying to secure a paycheck." Cedric froze. The statement hit harder than expected. Not because she raised her voice, because she sounded tired of defending herself against people exactly like him. For several awkward seconds, neither spoke. The ballroom noise faded behind them. Cedric suddenly became aware of how defensive he sounded. But apologizing didn't come naturally to him, especially not emotionally. Lizzie broke eye contact first. "Well," she said smoothly, "enjoy your evening, Mr. Hale." Then she walked away. Cedric watched her disappear through the crowd, while something unfamiliar settled inside his chest. Curiosity, real curiosity. Not physical attraction alone, something deeper. Because unlike everyone else in that room, Lizzie Monroe didn't seem impressed by his wealth at all. And honestly, that bothered him almost as much as it fascinated him. The rest of the night, Cedric caught himself searching the ballroom for her repeatedly, watching her laugh with staff members, watching her command attention effortlessly, watching other men approach her while she politely kept emotional distance between herself and everyone around her. By the time the gala ended, Cedric realized something dangerous. For the first time in years, a woman had challenged him instead of chasing him, and now he couldn't stop thinking about her. Cedric Hale was not used to rejection, especially not quiet rejection. Most women around him became interested the second they discovered who he was. Lizzie Monroe did the opposite. After the charity gala, Cedric expected their interaction to fade naturally. Instead, she stayed inside his mind constantly. Her confidence, her sharp response, the way she looked completely unimpressed by wealth. It irritated him and attracted him at the same time. 3 days after the gala, Lizzie arrived at her office downtown and found a massive bouquet of white orchids sitting beside her desk. No card, no signature, but she already knew. Her assistant grinned immediately. "Girl, what billionaire is trying to marry you?" Lizzie rolled her eyes, probably one with control issues. Still, she smiled slightly before placing the flowers aside. Later that evening, Cedric called her personally. "You ignored the flowers." Lizzie continued reviewing event contracts while holding the phone between her shoulder and ear. "I didn't ignore them. You didn't thank me either. That's because I didn't ask for them." Cedric almost laughed. "Almost. You always this difficult." "Well, are you always this arrogant?" That answer caught him off guard. Most people softened around Cedric. Lizzie challenged him naturally, and strangely enough, he liked it. Over the next few weeks, Cedric kept finding reasons to contact her. Business events, dinner invitations, charity consultations. At first, Lizzie rejected almost everything, not because she disliked him, because she didn't trust men who led with money. especially powerful men. Eventually, Cedric convinced her to join him for dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking downtown Chicago. The city lights stretched endlessly beneath them, while soft jazz played through hidden speakers overhead. Lizzie arrived wearing a fitted black coat over a dark burgundy dress that immediately stole Cedric's attention. "You're staring," she said calmly, while sitting down. "You noticed. You're not subtle." Cedric smirked faintly. For the first time in years, conversation with a woman felt effortless, not performative, not transactional. Real. Lizzie spoke about growing up on the South Side, about her mother, about building her event company from scratch. Cedric listened carefully the entire night. That surprised her. Most wealthy men interrupted constantly. Cedric didn't. When dinner ended, snow drifted softly across the rooftop while they stood near the balcony overlooking the city. For several quiet seconds, neither spoke. Then Cedric removed his coat slowly and placed it around her shoulders. Lizzie looked up at him carefully. "You know," she said softly, "you act emotionally unavailable for somebody who notices small things." Cedric held her gaze. "Maybe I only notice certain people." The tension between them deepened instantly. Not loud, not dramatic, just dangerous. And when their hands brushed briefly while walking toward the elevator, neither of them pulled away immediately. Their relationship developed slowly after that night. Cedric stopped trying to impress Lizzie with expensive gifts, because she clearly valued effort more than luxury. Instead, he gave her time, something he rarely gave anyone. They spent evenings inside hidden jazz lounges on Chicago's North Side, listening to live saxophone performances while sharing quiet conversations over wine. Sometimes they barely spoke at all, and somehow those moments still felt intimate. One rainy evening, Lizzie sat beside Cedric inside a private booth, while an old blues singer performed softly across the lounge. Cedric loosened his tie slightly. "You ever think about leaving Chicago?" he asked. Lizzie shook her head. "No. This city raised me." "You make it sound personal." "It is personal." Cedric studied her face carefully beneath the dim lights. "You love hard, don't you?" Lizzie looked down briefly before answering, "I used to." That response stayed with him. Later that night, Cedric drove her home himself. Rain tapped against the windows, while soft R&B music played quietly through the speakers. When they finally stopped outside her apartment building, silence filled the car for several long seconds. Cedric looked toward her slowly. "You still think I'm arrogant?" Lizzie smiled faintly. "Yes." He laughed quietly. "Fair enough." Then came another silence. Different this time. Closer. The emotional tension between them had been building for weeks. Cedric finally reached for her hand carefully. Not aggressively, almost cautiously. Lizzie looked down at their hands briefly before intertwining her fingers with his. That small gesture affected Cedric more than he expected, because trust never came easily to him. And for the first time in years, somebody felt emotionally safe. Cedric leaned closer gradually. Lizzie didn't move away. Their first kiss happened slowly inside that parked car, while rain blurred the city lights around them. No rushing, no performance, just warmth, emotion, relief. When they finally pulled apart, Cedric rested his forehead gently against hers. And quietly, almost like the words escaped accidentally, he admitted something honest. "I'm not good at this." Lizzie looked at him carefully. "At what?" "Letting people matter." That confession changed everything between them. Because underneath the expensive suits and controlled personality, Lizzie finally saw the emotionally damaged man hiding beneath Cedric's success, and she started falling for him because of it. Unfortunately, Cedric's fear never fully disappeared. Even during good moments, suspicion stayed buried underneath his emotions. Whenever wealthy men greeted Lizzie warmly at events, Cedric noticed. Whenever waiters flirted lightly, he noticed. Whenever another man stared too long, he noticed. He rarely said anything directly, but emotionally, he remained defensive, and Lizzie slowly started sensing it. Let me ask you something. Can a relationship survive if one person never fully trusts the other? Comment below. And if you're enjoying this story so far, Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Alex Romance and Divorce Stories, and turn on notifications for more emotional stories filled with love, betrayal, and life lessons every week. Because, trust me, Cedric and Lizzie's relationship was about to become much deeper and much more complicated. 8 months after meeting Lizzie, Cedric proposed unexpectedly during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. The moment happened quietly. No photographers, no audience, just rolling vineyards, cold evening air, and a private dinner beneath hanging lights. Lizzie stared at the diamond ring in complete shock. "Cedric, I know it's fast," he admitted, "but I'm tired of pretending I don't want a future with you." For the first time in years, Cedric sounded emotionally vulnerable without hiding behind sarcasm or control. Lizzie's eyes filled slightly, not because of the ring, because somebody finally chose her openly, completely. And despite all her fears about wealthy men, she said yes. Their wedding became one of Chicago's biggest social stories that year. The ceremony took place months later at an exclusive Napa Valley estate, surrounded by celebrities, executives, politicians, and media personalities. Lizzie looked breathtaking walking down the aisle in a fitted ivory gown while live violins echoed through the vineyard hills. Cedric barely took his eyes off her. For one perfect day, everything felt real, safe, hopeful. But once wedding photos reached social media, criticism exploded online almost immediately. Some people accused Lizzie of marrying for money. Others insulted their interracial relationship openly. Comment sections became brutal. Gold digger, attention seeker, another rich white man buying a trophy wife. Lizzie pretended those comments didn't affect her, but privately, they hurt deeply, especially because part of her feared Cedric secretly believed them too. At first, married life still felt exciting. Lavish vacations, penthouse dinners, private mornings together before work. Cedric became softer around her emotionally, more affectionate, more attentive. Sometimes he'd stop during meetings just to text her randomly, "Miss you. Did you eat yet? Come home early tonight." Those little moments mattered to Lizzie more than expensive gifts ever did. But gradually, old insecurities returned. And once they returned, they started poisoning everything quietly. The first serious argument happened nearly a year into their marriage. Lizzie had purchased a luxury SUV without discussing it first because hers constantly broke down during work travel. Cedric noticed immediately when the vehicle appeared inside the garage. "How much was it?" he asked calmly. Lizzie frowned slightly. "Why?" "I'm asking." She crossed her arms. "And I'm asking why it matters." Cedric's expression tightened. "Because we discuss major purchases." Lizzie laughed once in disbelief. "We're married, Cedric, not business partners. That doesn't mean financial decisions become random." The conversation escalated quickly after that. Not explosive. Worse, cold, sharp, passive-aggressive. And over time, similar moments increased. Whenever Lizzie spent money freely, Cedric made subtle comments. Whenever another man complimented her publicly, Cedric became distant afterward. Whenever she challenged him emotionally, he shut down instead of communicating openly. One night, after a charity event, Lizzie finally confronted him inside their penthouse kitchen. Rain hit the windows softly while Chicago's skyline glowed behind them. "You keep treating me like I married your bank account," she said quietly. Cedric stayed silent. That silence answered everything. Lizzie looked devastated immediately. "Wow," she whispered. "You actually believe it." Cedric rubbed his jaw tiredly but still didn't deny it fully. And honestly, that hurt her more than yelling would have. Because no matter how much she loved him, Cedric still viewed love through suspicion. That emotional distance slowly changed the marriage. Less laughter, less softness, less honesty. Yet despite the tension between them, life shifted unexpectedly again several weeks later. Lizzie stood inside a luxury bathroom staring at 2 positive pregnancy tests while her hands trembled. Twins. The doctor confirmed it days later. A boy and a girl. When Cedric heard the news, emotion completely broke through his usual composure. "You're serious?" he asked breathlessly. Lizzie nodded slowly with tears in her eyes. Cedric laughed in disbelief before pulling her into his arms tightly, and for a moment, a brief, beautiful moment, it felt like maybe love would finally be enough to save them. But neither of them understood yet that children can strengthen broken marriages temporarily, without actually fixing the damage underneath. The day Lizzie gave birth changed Cedric Hale completely. For years, people described him as emotionally distant, controlled, cold under pressure. But the second the nurse placed his newborn son into his arms inside the private Chicago hospital room, something inside him softened instantly. Cedric stared down at the tiny baby wrapped in blue fabric, while emotion filled his eyes faster than he could hide it. "He's so small," he whispered. Lizzie lay exhausted against the hospital bed, watching him carefully. For the first time since marrying him, she saw pure vulnerability on Cedric's face without fear or defensiveness attached to it. Then came their daughter, moments later. Cedric laughed quietly in disbelief while holding both babies close. "A boy and a girl," he muttered. "Wow." That night became one of the happiest moments of their marriage, and honestly, the months afterward almost felt magical too. Their Chicago penthouse transformed completely. Tiny blankets covered expensive furniture. Baby toys filled rooms that once felt emotionally empty. Late-night crying replaced silence. And somehow, the chaos brought warmth back into the marriage temporarily. Cedric became obsessed with fatherhood immediately. He cancelled meetings to attend doctor appointments, learned how to warm baby bottles himself, even paced the living room at 3 a.m. carrying one twin against his chest, while the other slept nearby. Lizzie watched those moments carefully, and they affected her deeply, because beneath all Cedric's emotional flaws, she saw something beautiful in him as a father. One evening, she quietly stood near the nursery doorway while Cedric sat beside the twins' cribs reading children's books with surprising seriousness. "You know they can't understand you yet, right?" Lizzie teased softly. Cedric looked up. "They need to hear my voice." Lizzie smiled for the first time in days. Small moments like that slowly rebuilt emotional closeness between them. Family dinners returned. Laughter returned. Even intimacy slowly improved for a while, because emotional warmth returned first. At night, they sometimes fell asleep together on the living room couch after exhausting days with the twins. And during those moments, it honestly looked like their marriage might survive everything, like love finally won. But unfortunately, temporary happiness can hide permanent problems for only so long. As the twins grew older, Cedric slowly buried himself in work again. At first, Lizzie understood. Hale cyber defense continued expanding internationally. More pressure followed, more responsibility, more travel. But eventually, the emotional distance returned too. Slowly, quietly, dangerously. Cedric started spending longer nights at the office. Phone calls interrupted dinner constantly. Business trips increased. Meanwhile, Lizzie spent most days balancing motherhood, exhaustion, and emotional loneliness inside a luxury penthouse that increasingly felt empty. Nannies helped. Money helped. Comfort existed everywhere around her. But emotional presence? That disappeared again. One evening, after putting the twins to sleep, Lizzie found Cedric sitting alone in his office, reviewing contracts on multiple computer screens. "You're still working?" she asked softly. Cedric barely looked up. "I need these reports finished before tomorrow." Lizzie leaned against the doorway. "You said that yesterday too." Cedric sighed tiredly. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you present." That answer finally made him look at her. Lizzie crossed her arms slowly. "The kids barely saw you today. I'm doing this for all of us." "That's always your answer." Cedric rubbed his forehead, because deep down, he genuinely believed financial security proved love. That mindset had controlled him since childhood. But Lizzie needed something different now. Something emotional. Something human. "You provide everything except yourself," she said quietly. The room went silent immediately. Cedric's face changed. That sentence hit him harder than she realized. Because despite all his wealth, his biggest fear remained the same. Never being enough emotionally. "You think I'm a bad husband?" he asked carefully. Lizzie's expression softened slightly. "No," she admitted. "I think you don't know how to stop protecting yourself." Cedric looked away after that, and honestly, that hurt her too, because once again, instead of opening emotionally, he shut down completely. The distance between them returned stronger after that night. Less affection, less conversation, less connection, and loneliness slowly started settling inside Lizzie's chest again. The dangerous kind, the kind that makes emotional attention feel intoxicating when it finally arrives from somewhere else. Lizzie met Nolan Pierce during a luxury music fundraiser in Atlanta nearly 8 months later. By then, the twins were toddlers. Cedric stayed constantly busy, and Lizzie emotionally felt more alone inside her marriage than she ever expected possible. The fundraiser took place inside a renovated rooftop venue overlooking downtown Atlanta. Live music echoed across the room, while celebrities, athletes, and executives moved through elegant conversations beneath gold lighting. Lizzie coordinated event details professionally like always. Then Nolan approached her near the bar. Tall, smooth voice, confident smile, not flashy, just naturally charismatic. "You're the only person in this building who looks more stressed than the staff," he joked lightly. Lizzie laughed, despite herself. "That obvious?" A little. Unlike most men around wealthy environments, Nolan didn't immediately flirt aggressively. He listened. That became the dangerous part. Over the next several weeks, their paths crossed repeatedly through event work and social circles. At first, Lizzie kept emotional distance. Strict distance. Because, despite everything wrong in her marriage, she still loved her husband. But Nolan noticed things Cedric stopped noticing. When she looked exhausted, when she felt emotionally disconnected, when she forced smiles during conversations. One night, after another exhausting argument with Cedric, Lizzie sat alone outside an Atlanta hotel lounge during a work trip, while staring silently at the city below. Nolan joined her carefully. "You okay?" Lizzie exhaled slowly. "Honestly, I don't even know anymore." Nolan stayed quiet instead of interrupting. That mattered, because lately, nobody simply listened to her anymore. Not completely. Eventually, words started pouring out naturally. The loneliness, the emotional distance, the feeling of becoming invisible inside her own marriage. Nolan listened to everything without judgment. And slowly, emotional attachment formed between them before Lizzie fully realized it happening. That terrified her, because emotional cheating rarely starts with attraction. It starts with feeling understood. Lizzie resisted crossing the line for weeks, maybe months. Every time emotional tension grew stronger between her and Nolan, guilt followed immediately afterward. She tried pulling away several times, focused more on her children, tried reconnecting with Cedric emotionally. But the marriage kept returning to the same painful cycle. Distance, silence, work, isolation. Meanwhile, Nolan continued showing up emotionally during moments Cedric didn't. One rainy evening in Atlanta, after a fundraiser ended, Lizzie and Nolan sat together inside a quiet hotel lounge discussing music, family, and relationships. Their conversation lasted hours. At some point, silence settled naturally between them. Nolan looked at her carefully. "You deserve to feel loved properly." Lizzie lowered her eyes immediately. "Please don't say things like that." "Why?" "Because I'm married." Nolan nodded slowly. "But unhappy." That word stayed inside her mind long after, and eventually, the line got crossed. Not dramatically, not recklessly, quietly, painfully. Afterward, Lizzie sat alone at the edge of the hotel bed crying silently, while Nolan stood nearby unsure what to say. She covered her face immediately. Oh my God! The guilt hit instantly, because despite her loneliness, despite the emotional neglect, she never imagined herself becoming this woman. Nolan approached slowly. "Lizzie, no," she whispered emotionally. "This can't happen again." But emotional attachment had already formed, and once emotional affairs become physical, everything changes afterward. Back in Chicago, Cedric noticed subtle differences immediately. Lizzie guarded her phone more carefully. She became distracted during conversations, emotionally absent. At first, Cedric ignored his suspicions because part of him feared becoming paranoid again. But eventually, his instincts became impossible to silence. One night, while Lizzie showered upstairs, her phone buzzed repeatedly against the kitchen counter. Cedric glanced down briefly. Nolan Pierce. His jaw tightened instantly. The message preview disappeared before he could read everything fully, but he saw enough. "Miss you already." Cedric slowly placed the phone back exactly where it was. His chest tightened painfully. Not anger yet. Fear, because deep down, he already sensed the marriage slipping away from him. Days later, Cedric sat silently inside his downtown office after midnight, staring at a business card resting on his desk. Private Investigations, Daniel Mercer. For nearly 10 minutes, he debated with himself internally. Then finally, Cedric picked up the phone. "I need someone followed," he said quietly. And with that single decision, the destruction of their marriage officially began. Cedric barely slept after hiring the private investigator. For days he tried convincing himself he was overreacting. Maybe Nolan Pierce was just a business contact. Maybe the messages meant nothing. Maybe his old insecurities were poisoning his judgment again. But deep down, Cedric already knew something was wrong. The investigators' reports arrived quietly over the next 2 weeks. Hotel receipts, photos, travel records, late-night meetings. None of the evidence looked fully innocent anymore. Each update tightened something painful inside Cedric's chest. Still, he avoided confronting Lizzie immediately. Part of him feared hearing the truth out loud. Another part feared losing control emotionally if the affair became real. One Thursday evening, inside their penthouse kitchen, Lizzie stood preparing bottles for the twins while Cedric watched her silently from across the marble counter. She looked normal, calm, beautiful. That almost made everything worse. Because betrayal rarely looks obvious at first. "You okay?" Lizzie asked, after noticing his stare. Cedric forced a small nod. "Long week." She walked closer and kissed his cheek gently before returning to the kitchen. That simple gesture nearly broke him emotionally, because now every affectionate moment carried doubt attached to it. Later that night, Cedric received another call from Daniel Mercer. "I tracked her upcoming schedule," the investigator explained quietly. "She'll be in Miami Saturday for the Luxury Hospitality Conference." Cedric stared out the office windows overlooking downtown Chicago. "And Nolan?" A brief pause followed. "He booked the same hotel." Cedric closed his eyes immediately. Silence filled the office. Not angry silence, devastated silence. Finally he spoke again. "Send me everything." Saturday arrived colder than expected in Chicago. Meanwhile, Miami welcomed tourists with humid air and glowing nightlife. Cedric landed hours after Lizzie's flight without informing her he was coming. The private investigator already transferred hotel access details earlier that afternoon. Every step afterward felt unreal. The elevator ride, the hallway, the room number. Cedric stood outside the luxury suite with a copied electronic keycard trembling slightly between his fingers. Years of marriage suddenly balanced on one terrible moment. He could still walk away, still pretend, still avoid confirmation. But deep down, he needed the truth now, no matter how ugly it became. Cedric inhaled slowly, then opened the door. The hotel suite smelled like expensive perfume and champagne. Soft music played somewhere near the balcony, and standing near the bed was Lizzie, with Nolan. Time almost stopped. Nobody moved initially. Nobody even breathed properly. Lizzie's face drained of color instantly, while Nolan stumbled backward in complete shock. "Cedric." "No," Cedric interrupted quietly. That single word froze the room. His voice sounded calm, too calm. The dangerous kind of calm created by emotional devastation. Nolan grabbed his shirt quickly from a nearby chair. "This isn't." "Get out," Cedric said, without even looking at him. Nolan hesitated briefly before realizing this situation had become far bigger than him. Within seconds, he disappeared toward the suite entrance and shut the door behind him. Now, only husband and wife remained. The silence afterward felt unbearable. Lizzie wiped beneath her eyes quickly while trying to steady her breathing. "Cedric, wait, I can explain." "No. No. Don't insult me more than you already have. The pain in his voice cut straight through her. Cedric looked around the room slowly. The champagne glasses, the scattered clothes, the hotel bed. Every detail felt humiliating. How long? He asked quietly. Lizzie swallowed hard. Cedric, how long? Months. He nodded slowly, like the answer physically wounded him. And, honestly, it did. Cedric walked farther into the suite while rubbing one hand across his jaw tightly. You lied to me. Every single day. Lizzie shook her head emotionally. I never wanted this to happen. Interesting, Cedric replied bitterly. Because this room says otherwise. Tears gathered in Lizzie's eyes immediately. I was lonely. Cedric laughed once. Short, broken. You think loneliness gives you the right to destroy your family. You stopped seeing me. That answer echoed sharply through the suite. Cedric froze. Lizzie's chest rose heavily now after years of frustration finally reaching the surface. You buried yourself inside work again, she continued emotionally. Every conversation became schedules, meetings, business calls. I was providing for us. I needed my husband. The silence afterward turned painfully heavy. Cedric stared at her, like he genuinely didn't know what to say anymore, because part of him understood exactly what she meant. And that made the betrayal hurt even worse. Cedric walked toward the balcony slowly before stopping near the glass doors overlooking Miami's glowing skyline. His shoulders looked heavier now. Smaller, somehow. Years of emotional armor cracking in real time. Behind him, Lizzie wiped tears from her face while trying to control her breathing. I tried to stay patient with you, she whispered. I really did. Cedric never turned around. Then why does this feel like revenge? Lizzie looked down at the floor, because eventually I stopped feeling desired. Those words landed hard. Cedric finally faced her again. What does that mean? Lizzie hesitated, and honestly, part of her knew she should stop talking before anger made things worse. But years of hidden frustration were spilling out too fast now. Their marriage had been emotionally dying for a long time. Tonight simply exposed the body. You never let yourself fully connect with me, she admitted shakily. Even when we were intimate, it felt like you were emotionally somewhere else. Cedric's expression hardened immediately. Careful, Lizzie. No, she replied through tears. You deserve honesty now. Cedric shook his head slowly. So this is my fault? That's not what I'm saying. Then say what you mean. Lizzie covered her face briefly before finally speaking the truth she buried for years. Your manhood is something. It's not satisfying, it's small, you are always distant, AMD, always angry, Cedric. And after the twins, I couldn't keep pretending anymore. The room fell completely silent. Cedric stared at her in disbelief. Not anger, pure humiliation. The kind capable of breaking a person internally. Lizzie instantly regretted saying it. Not because she completely lied, because she weaponized his deepest insecurity during the worst moment possible. Cedric swallowed hard while his eyes filled slowly. You promised you understood me, he whispered. I did. Then why would you say something like that? Lizzie cried harder now. Because I'm angry too. She admitted emotionally. You spent years making me feel emotionally unwanted. Years questioning whether I loved you for real. Years shutting me out whenever things became vulnerable. Cedric looked shattered standing there, and for the first time since entering the suite, Lizzie realized just how deeply she had hurt him. Not just as a husband, as a man. As someone who trusted her with his biggest insecurity. Cedric's voice lowered dangerously afterward. So every time you touched me. Lizzie immediately shook her head. Don't do that. You pitied me? No. Then what? She couldn't answer immediately. And that silence destroyed him even more. Cedric paced across the room slowly, while emotion finally overwhelmed his composure completely. Years of insecurity crashed together inside his head all at once. The cheating, the lies, the humiliation, the resentment, and then suddenly, one terrifying thought entered his mind. Cedric stopped walking, turned toward her slowly, and asked the question that changed everything. Were the twins even mine? Smack. Lizzie slapped him instantly, hard enough to turn his face sideways. Both of them froze afterward. Heavy silence filled the suite, while tears streamed down Lizzie's cheeks uncontrollably. "Don't do that," she whispered emotionally. "Don't destroy the only innocent thing left in this marriage." Cedric touched the side of his face slowly, but said nothing, because deep down, he already regretted asking. Not because the question lacked logic, because pain made him cruel too. Lizzie stepped backward while wiping her face repeatedly. "They're your children," she said firmly. "Don't ever question that again." Cedric looked exhausted now, completely exhausted. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. Like the man standing inside that hotel suite barely recognized himself anymore. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Cedric slowly removed his wedding ring. Lizzie's breathing caught instantly. "Cedric." He stared down at the ring quietly before placing it onto the nearby table. "I would have forgiven almost anything," he admitted softly, "but humiliating me with the one thing I trusted you to protect." His voice broke slightly, and honestly, hearing Cedric Hale emotionally crack like that terrified Lizzie more than yelling ever could. Because powerful men rarely sound fragile, but heartbreak stripped every defense away from him. Cedric wiped beneath one eye quickly before turning toward the door. Lizzie stepped forward immediately. "Please, don't leave like this." He stopped walking briefly, but never turned around. "What hurts the most," he said quietly, "is realizing I kept fighting for a marriage that already died inside you a long time ago." Then he walked out. No screaming, no threats, no dramatic revenge speech. Just heartbreak, raw heartbreak. And once the hotel room door finally closed behind him, Lizzie collapsed onto the edge of the bed crying uncontrollably. Because deep down, she knew something irreversible had happened that night. Not just betrayal, not just divorce. She had broken the one man who genuinely tried to love her despite his flaws. And Cedric? As he walked through the luxury hotel lobby wiping tears before strangers could fully notice, he realized money, success, and power meant absolutely nothing when the person you trusted most learns exactly where to hurt you. Cedric returned to Chicago emotionally destroyed. The private jet landed shortly before sunrise, but he never went home. Instead, he drove directly to another penthouse apartment he owned downtown and stayed there alone for nearly 2 days. No meetings, no interviews, no calls returned. Monica nearly panicked when he ignored the company board repeatedly. Then, eventually, the rumors started spreading online. A celebrity blogger posted blurry photos of Lizzie entering the Miami hotel. Another outlet connected Nolan Pierce to the same location hours later. Within 48 hours, social media exploded completely. Everybody had opinions. Some blamed Lizzie immediately. Others accused Cedric of emotionally neglecting his marriage. Comment sections became brutal. Gold digger, weak husband, fake marriage, attention-seeking couple. And through all the noise, the twins remained completely innocent. That part hurt Cedric most. One evening, he sat silently inside the dark penthouse living room while news coverage played across muted television screens nearby. His wedding photo flashed briefly across one headline: Chicago tech CEO facing divorce scandal. Cedric looked away immediately. The image physically hurt to see now. A knock interrupted the silence. Monica entered carefully holding a folder. "The board wants a statement." Cedric rubbed his tired eyes slowly. "They'll get nothing." "Cedric." "I said no." Monica hesitated before sitting nearby. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then quietly, she asked the question nobody else dared ask him directly. "Did she love you?" Cedric stared ahead silently. And honestly, that question hurt more than the cheating itself. Because part of him still believed Lizzie once truly loved him. That made losing her even harder. Finally, Cedric answered softly, "I think she tried." Meanwhile, across the city, Lizzie faced judgment from every direction too. Former clients whispered about her. Friends distanced themselves. Even grocery shopping became uncomfortable once people recognized her face online. But the worst moments happened at night after putting the twins to sleep. Because silence forced her to sit alone with guilt. Real guilt. Not guilt for being unhappy. Guilt for how everything ended. Especially the words she said inside that Miami hotel suite. Deep down, Lizzie knew she crossed a line she could never fully repair. Not because Cedric lacked flaws, because she attacked the exact insecurity he trusted her to protect. And now, there was no taking those words back. 3 weeks after Miami, Cedric attended therapy for the first time in his life. At first, he hated the idea completely. Talking about emotions felt unnatural to him. Weak, even. But eventually, the emotional pressure became impossible to carry alone anymore. Inside a quiet office overlooking downtown Chicago, Cedric sat stiffly across from Dr. Elaine Porter, while avoiding eye contact completely. "So," she said gently, "why are you here?" Cedric laughed bitterly. "You've seen the headlines. I'm asking, what brought you emotionally?" That question lingered heavily between them. Cedric leaned back slowly. "My wife cheated on me." Dr. Porter nodded carefully. "And what hurt most about it?" Cedric answered immediately. "The humiliation, not the betrayal?" "That too." Silence followed briefly. Then Dr. Porter asked softly, "Why did humiliation affect you so deeply?" Cedric opened his mouth, stopped, because suddenly memories returned faster than expected. His father, Indiana, old insecurities, the fear of inadequacy he spent years hiding beneath success. Cedric exhaled slowly. "I spent my whole life trying not to feel small." Dr. Porter listened quietly. "And did becoming wealthy fix that feeling?" Cedric stared out the window toward Chicago's skyline. No. For the first time in years, Cedric finally admitted something painful to himself. Money protected his image, not his emotional wounds. Those wounds remained untouched for decades, and unfortunately, unresolved insecurities eventually poison relationships from the inside. Meanwhile, Lizzie struggled emotionally too. One afternoon, Rochelle Monroe visited her daughter's condo after noticing how withdrawn she'd become. The twins played quietly in the next room, while Lizzie sat motionless at the kitchen table. "You look exhausted," Rochelle said gently. Lizzie gave a weak smile. "I am." Rochelle studied her daughter carefully before asking, "Do you regret it?" Lizzie's eyes immediately filled. "Yes." That answer came fast. Too fast to fake. Rochelle sighed softly before sitting beside her. "Then why'd you do it?" Lizzie looked down at her hands. "Because I felt emotionally invisible for so long." But cheating didn't fix that. "No," Lizzie admitted quietly. "It just destroyed everything faster." That realization haunted her daily afterward. Because despite her loneliness, despite the resentment, she still loved parts of Cedric deeply. And realizing love wasn't enough hurt more than she expected. Nearly 4 months after Miami, Cedric and Lizzie finally met privately to finalize divorce paperwork. The twins stayed with Rochelle for the evening. Rain tapped softly against the windows of the attorney's downtown office, while tension filled the room quietly. Cedric looked thinner now, more tired, less emotionally guarded somehow. Lizzie noticed immediately. "So," she said softly, "therapy's helping?" Cedric looked surprised. "How'd you know? You stopped looking angry all the time." That answer almost made him smile. Almost. The attorney eventually excused himself briefly, leaving them alone together for the first time since Miami. Neither spoke immediately. Because honestly, where do two broken people even begin after destroying each other emotionally? Finally, Cedric looked toward her carefully. "How are the twins?" Lizzie softened instantly at the mention of them. "They miss you." Pain crossed Cedric's face immediately. "I miss them too." The silence afterward felt gentler than before. Still sad, but calmer now, less explosive. Lizzie folded her hands together nervously. "You know, I never stopped loving you completely." Cedric looked down briefly. "I know." That surprised her. "You do? You don't cry the way you cried in Miami for somebody you never loved." Lizzie's eyes watered instantly. For several seconds, neither moved. Then, Cedric quietly admitted something honest too. "I made you feel emotionally alone. Lizzie looked at him carefully. And I betrayed you instead of leaving honestly. Cedric nodded slowly. For the first time in years, both of them finally stopped defending themselves emotionally. No ego, no blame shifting, just truth. And strangely enough, honesty arrived only after the marriage already died. You know what's sad? Lizzie asked quietly. Cedric looked toward her. We probably could have fixed this years ago if we actually communicated honestly. Cedric gave a tired laugh. Yeah. Another silence followed. Different this time. Not hostile, just heartbreaking. Then Lizzie finally whispered the question living inside her chest for months. Do you hate me? Cedric looked at her for a very long time before answering. No. That response shattered her emotionally, because hatred would have been easier. Instead, what remained between them felt heavier. Loss, regret, love damaged beyond repair. The divorce finalized quietly 2 weeks later. No dramatic courtroom fight, no public interviews, no ugly custody battle. Just signatures, paperwork, and two people accepting that love alone could not save what they broke emotionally. Months later, Cedric spent more time with the twins regularly while balancing therapy and work differently. For the first time in his adult life, he started prioritizing emotional health instead of hiding behind money and control constantly. He even repaired his relationship with his mother slowly. Meanwhile, Lizzie rebuilt her event business carefully while learning difficult lessons about loneliness, communication, and accountability. Neither of them became villains completely, and honestly, that's what made their story painful. Because sometimes relationships fail without one single monster destroying everything. Sometimes two wounded people simply hurt each other slowly while trying to feel loved properly. One evening during a peaceful custody exchange, Cedric watched Lizzie helping their daughter zip her small pink jacket while their son laughed nearby holding a toy airplane. For a brief second, sadness crossed his face again. Because part of him would always mourn the family they almost became. Lizzie noticed the expression immediately. You okay? She asked softly. Cedric nodded once. Just thinking. About what? He looked toward the twins. How close we came to getting it right. Lizzie lowered her eyes quietly after that, because deep down, she thought about that too, all the time, and maybe that became the real tragedy of their marriage. Not the cheating, not the divorce, not even the humiliation. The real tragedy was realizing they loved each other while lacking the emotional tools needed to protect that love properly. Some people use money to replace vulnerability. Others use attention to replace loneliness. But eventually, unresolved pain always finds its way into relationships. And if people refuse to heal honestly, love slowly suffocates beneath pride, fear, insecurity, and silence. Cedric learned that success means nothing without emotional presence. Lizzie learned that loneliness should be communicated honestly before betrayal enters the picture. And both of them learned one painful truth too late. The people we love most often trust us with their deepest insecurities. Once we weaponize those insecurities against them, some wounds never fully disappear. So, let me ask you something before this story ends. Who truly destroyed this marriage? Cedric? Lizzie? Or both of them together? Comment below. And if this story touched you emotionally, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Alex Romance and Divorce Stories, and share this story with someone who needs the reminder that love requires more than attraction. It requires trust, honesty, communication, and emotional safety. Because without those things, even the strongest love can fall apart quietly behind closed doors.
Hope you enjoyed the story, and remember to subscribe. Bye.